Hey, Sagi, how are you?
Hi, great.
Sagi, before we dive into your role in the Israel Innovation Authority, I want our audience to understand a little bit about yourself. Like, what did you do before? A little bit of a background about you.
Well, on my background is an economist, finance, with great passion, starting the academic one, but also the, the one on the field of doing technology and working a lot on technological change in terms of macroeconomic and finance. Uh, been working in Bank of Israel and National Economic Council, the Prime Minister's office, and now in the Innovation Authority.
And your specific role right now in the Innovation Authority?
I'm heading the growth division, which is heading most of the direct investment of the Innovation Authority within high-tech companies.
Amazing. So we are a global fintech nation summit. We have all the nations that are leading in fintech, they're all creating all these fintech bridges. And I want to start with, we have so many topics during this summit, open banking and opportunities like that. And I know Israel, of course, I'm from Israel, is like the innovation nation. Like there's so much innovation here and so many great companies. If it's fintech, if it's insurtech, and many other segments. How is this innovation like? Why do we need an innovation authority in Israel? What is the role of the innovation authority in Israel? How does it help these startups?
The Innovation Authority actually, with having the Office of the Chief Scientist before it, is almost 50 years old. We have started before there were any innovation agency globally, and Israel was probably one of the last countries on the list of how much R&D is being performed in the country. We are now in the first place in the world, so it took us 50 years of a lot of effort. And the way we work is that we have like two legs. One is within the industry, and the second one is within the government. And we know how to do the connection, how to put the right government money within the industry as good investments. And on the other side, how to take the understanding of the industry and the knowledge coming from the technology and bringing it to the government in order to create the right policies.
So, well, because people are hearing about Israel as the startup nation and all kinds of talks like that, and they're asking themselves, I mean, why do we need like the government, like your role in actually helping these startups? Like how are you helping? Maybe you can give us examples of things that you initiated when fintech was just born in Israel. You know, what were the moves that you guys did and other players to come up with the fintech industry in Israel?
So first of all, regardless to fintech, we're investing in all technologies. We are the biggest early stage investor in Israel. We are giving conditional loans, so we're not getting into equity, and we are not diluting the entrepreneurs and the investors. So we are giving a lot of money that is purely to growth in the very early stages in very high risk companies. But we're also looking and creating the ecosystem. So if you look back on the early 1990s, then the Office of the Chief Scientist basically initiated the Yozma program that have created the Israeli venture capital industry. And if you look to this millennium, then in 2010, 2011, we actually formed with the Ministry of Finance two large R&D centers of Citibank and of Barclays.
Hmm.
And back then, I remember it wasn't even called fintech. I think that the word, at least in Israel, wasn't really fintech, but it actually exposed the ecosystem here and the entrepreneurs and the investors to global banking and to global markets of the financial sector and to the technologies and regulation that are being used within this sector. And it actually created a lot of the infrastructure that was needed for the entrepreneurs to create companies, fintech companies. So, those centers, we put our money, they were built, we went out, and the market actually came in, and that's for us a success to see how we get inside and how we get out, and then the money is keeping on flowing with very large amounts of money after the government money is gone. So the
Yeah.
government is taking the high risk in the beginning in the same way we do with early stage startups.
Yeah, because I've been hearing all kinds of players even in during this summit talking about Israel, and I want to actually share with you a little bit of a fact that I learned. So something interesting. The Ministry of Finance from the Netherlands issued a manifesto saying that the Netherlands needs to come up and focus in fintech because that's growing, and they want the Netherlands to create these fintech bridges to two nations, two markets. And he mentioned Israel and Singapore. Israel and Singapore as the fintech bridges that the Netherlands needs to reach. So why is Israel, and not only there, like why is Israel so interesting? Because I know that Israel is a small market, and the banks here are, they're not that innovative. I mean, the consumer doesn't feel the innovation here. So how come like this is so attractive to so many other markets? And we can also talk about cyber and other things that are connected to fintech, right?
So our domestic market is small, and that is the main reason why the Israeli high tech is so successful. Because every startup that is born in Israel is born as a global company aiming for the global market. And when you start something small and you're aiming to the huge global market, you need two things. One is to have a very innovative idea, because if you're like everybody else, then all odds are against you, right? So you need to be very unique and very efficient. Uh, so that's one. The other thing is that from the very beginning, as you do the market validation, you look to the global market. And if the market validation is, and your plans are to the global market, and you're very nimble, fast, agile, efficient, also capital efficient, then you have a lot of advantages that together with a lot of capabilities of the ecosystem and of our culture that exists here around us, we managed to build companies. In the past, we used to build startups that were technological, but those were the 90s. When you look these days, we had JFrog doing an IPO this week.
Hmm.
It's
Wow.
not, and it's something that we see, okay, that's great, but it's not the first company doing huge IPO in the last few years. And you see a whole bunch of companies just, waiting on the list. So some of them it will take a year or two, for some, 4 or 5, but we've managed to actually build very large companies coming from Israel. And because the world is becoming very connected and digital, and the economy is becoming, the internet economy in many places, then the location, which in the past used to be a minus for Israel, today doesn't matter much. You can sit in Austria, Switzerland, Israel. If you go to the US, it's the same. It's only the difference of the hours.
Yeah.
Besides that, there's no other difference.
Mhm. Very interesting. I also wanted to ask you about, we're hearing a lot of the recent weeks about the Emirates, these markets, and like of course the peace process, the peace with Israel, and now opening up new markets. And I'm seeing that the first delegations that are flying both ways are the fintechs or the banks. So what is the opportunity you see over there? I mean, for both nations, let's say.
I think that in many aspects, the UAE is actually completing Israel. We are familiar with our colleagues on their government, very efficient government, very professional. A little bit like Israel, they were under the British mandate before. which also makes the law very very advanced. In some ways, even parts of it are similar. Uh, but while Israelis are very good in innovation and technology and scaling, let's call it bottom up, then the UAE is, with its very efficient government and a lot of state strategy, is actually like a great first adapter, making regulation agile much faster, making doing business very fast. So that's one place where they are completing us. The other place is that they have resources, and they also have some centers of banking and financial sector players. So they are actually a place where if you go and you start scaling up, you have an advantage going to Asia, Africa, and also to our region, which is not that small. And if we're talking on fintech, then the markets are also quite large.
Amazing. So there is a lot of opportunity. That's what you're saying for these collaborations.
Yes, there are a lot of opportunities. Of course, that business need to be done in the right manner, and according to culture, and it's very important to do everything as planned and to do it right. But I think that at the end, it's a country with a lot of spirit of entrepreneurship and capabilities, and it's also a Western economy.
Mm-hmm.
If you look on the GDP per capita, it's much closer to Israel. The gaps are not that large like with other countries that we are neighboring, where the market is very small. Over there, the market is large, and it's also a very big hub. So there are a lot of opportunities. I think that the economic opportunities are much larger than in previous peace accords.
Amazing. I wanted to ask you about, of course, open banking in Israel, sandbox program, stuff that you guys are launching, of course, with other players. If you can mention what's going on, because a lot of people here in the summit, they're hearing about open banking in Australia, open banking, of course, in the UK. Other markets are just starting, and every market call it in a different name, I guess. So what's the situation in Israel?
So in terms of regulation, we have regulation of open and the security authority. We had some delays because there were some changes in government and too many elections, some say. But things are advancing, and what we're going to see is the open banking regulation getting in. Data will start flowing and be more open, and then competition will kick in, and the startups and the tech companies will have much more opportunities. Together with this regulation, there's also a regulation that is waiting for the parliament of building like a legislation sandbox, which will give the capabilities for the regulators to give waivers for both big pilots, and for initiation of new markets and bringing in new business model and new technologies. We are also working with the regulators to bring them the knowledge and the technological understanding of smaller companies, of unique technologies, in order to help them give the waivers or build the regulation that will be suitable also for very innovative ideas. And there's also a regulation of the security authority that will enable much more innovative technology and marketplaces to be created here in Israel. We're also working very closely with the security authority on both building regulations and opening markets on one side, on the side of investments, which is also important because financial organizations are investing more in fintech. That's their own business with understanding. But also we're working with the security authority to finance pilots, technological pilots that are very innovative and can be very risky on the side of the regulator. So we're helping them, getting them in and taking much more risk on the side of the government and giving much more opportunities for the industry.
I can tell you from the outside perspective, I'm seeing a lot of programs that you guys are launching, a lot of pushing. I mean, maybe you guys just got funding from the government, because I'm seeing a lot of new openings and new programs, and I guess this is the right time to do it, right?
Yes, well, I think that under the Corona crisis, the government of Israel actually made some smart decisions in giving the Innovation Authority funds for investment, because during this period, with some crunch, at least in the beginning, money was very, very effective. We also made some very smart programs. One is very fast, we call it the fast track investment within early stage startups. We actually injected capital inside, and then the market followed us, and many startups got funding and basically are over the distress. So that was one key element that the government basically managed through our capabilities of investment to kick in and impact the market. And if we go to the later stages where companies are scaling, so what we were doing there, what we are doing there, is actually connecting the institutional investors. Until now, in the last 20 years, there was what is globally, it's called investment home bias, where institutional investors are investing within their own country more. In the high-tech sector in Israel, we had an anti-home bias. So we are now managing to break this anti-home bias and connect the institutional investors, being the large banks, the large insurance companies, the investment houses, to come in and build capabilities to invest in scale-ups, in growth companies, in more mature startups. But as they do that, and they must do that because the economy is changing and they are moving from real estate to digital economy and technology, so they are not only investing more, they also understand more, but they have their own capabilities because they are very big financial players. So as they come into the market more and more and invest more in technology, they will invest much more in fintech, both as investors in terms of money, but also as strategic partners or strategic investors, opening their capabilities or using their resources to scale up with companies, not only locally, but also globally. So actually, it's something that is really changing or going to change and changing the local ecosystem, connecting with the financial sector, and also the stock exchange is starting to kick in, and we're going to see a lot of IPOs, domestic IPOs, which is something we haven't seen for many years. So the market is starting to kick in and becoming much more the local market and becoming much more of a strong player within the ecosystem of the high tech.
Amazing. Sagi, we are running out of time. This is super interesting. I could have talked with you for much longer, and I'm sure a lot of people who are watching us right now want to connect with you, with the Innovation Authority, to learn about the sandbox programs. Other international players are looking to work with an Israeli company. And our summit is not just about the talks; it's also about the matchmaking capabilities. So I invite all of you guys to network during the summit, and of course to visit Israel's Innovation Authority and read more about these programs, right?
Yeah, and there's more to come in many fields, and we're just pushing more and more because these days, you know, that the global economy is changing. We need to look at the new equilibrium and, you know, how the new economy will be formed and help the high tech to achieve the new goals.
Amazing, amazing. Thank you very much, Sagi. Lots of new opportunities and bridges, and I hope to talk to you soon about more programs. Thank you, and enjoy the summit.
Thank you, Nir.